This lesson, we're going to do a quick overview of all of the code that we've set up in the earlier lessons, as well as I'm going to give you some tips going forward, how to improve and how to do even more with Pusher. So let's open up our editor. And first of all, we're going to look at index.js. So we brought in a few packages, Express, Pusher, body parser. So we needed all of these in order to accomplish all the functionality that we're looking for. So Pusher, we set up an app on Pusher. We got a key, secret key, set up a cluster, encrypted. So these are all of the connection information, authentication information that we need to authenticate with Pusher. And we set up that application on Pusher. We got a lot of the source code as well from Pusher as well. And then we used some middleware here for body parser, where we were grabbing the JSON data. We were also URL encoding it and sending it over into our routes because we needed to pick up that request body information. Next, we set up our public folder as our static route so that whenever we load to the page, by default, it will look to the public folder for our index and so on for other files. So essentially setting up our local server in order to work properly on port 3000. So we're listing on port 3000, and you can adjust that as well as needed. And so this is all coming from Express and body parser. And then next, also with Express, we have the ability to create routes. So we created a post route to comment, and this is where we can pick up any content that gets posted there. We pick it up within the request body. So again, coming from body parser, and we put it into an object, getting a name and a message, take that object, send it over to the Pusher trigger, and then all we're doing is we're doing a response back to the user. So we're not actually making any use of this right now, but we could just as easily take that it's been sent and we could error check. So there's a number of things that we could do at this point as well. And just right now, we're just sending that it's created true, and we could make use of that as well within our front end code that the message was sent or something like that whenever we see that response. So next, going into the front end. So we've got all of the HTML and JavaScript in one spot here, and we want to also move this JavaScript out. So let's do that as well. So we're going to separate it out as a separate script file. So creating a brand new file, and let's go ahead and save this as script.js. So remember to save it within the public folder. And then let's simply link out to it. So source and linking out to script.js. So there we go. So clean that up. So we didn't really have a whole lot going on in the front end, and we needed to have a form in order to get those variables, those values, give the user a place to input that content, and that was really it. And we also needed somewhere to deposit the messages that were coming in. And of course, you can do a whole bunch more with styling, and you can send even more variables. So it's all up to you. Depending on what you want to send and retrieve back, you can customize this as needed. Next, we had to bring in the Pusher library in order to have our JavaScript functionality. And opening up the JavaScript file, we used a self-invoking function to wrap all of our JavaScript code, and we have a number of functions and variables that we set up. So Pusher to console log, so you can keep that or you can get rid of that. It's up to you. If you're going into production, you can get rid of that as well. Next, we've got Pusher, so we had to set our variables, and all this information was coming from Pusher, the cluster that we're on, encrypted to, and over here, we just had to subscribe to whatever the channel name is that we created. So we just kept it as my channel, but of course, if you customize this, then you got to make sure that they match in order to subscribe to the channel and be able to retrieve back that content that's coming through. You can have multiple channels as well and so on. So there's a lot more complexity that you can add in as well. Messages, so we just grabbed that message element. Next, we were binding the my event. So the event, again, my event is coming from here. So it's passing in as my event within the Pusher object, and then we need to retrieve that as my event as well. We created a function to separate out the functions from the event listeners that we've got new comments. So that's over here. And we're grabbing the data. We're outputting into the console log so that we can see what data is coming in. And you can get rid of that as well. This was just for development purposes. We're grabbing the element, we're creating an element, and we're appending that element to messages. Over here, we've got an event listener that whenever the user hits the submit button, we're picking up the data from the input fields. We're also console logging it out, so I'll just comment these ones out because we don't really need to use the console logs. And then we had our AJAX request. So we were posting. We had to send some header information because we are sending it within a JSON format so that we know how to retrieve it. And then last over here, we had to stringify our new comment object into stringified format to be able to send it within our AJAX request. And that was all there really was to this application. Really simple and straightforward. And as mentioned earlier, there's a lot of resources on Pusher. So going in, and when you sign up for your account, you've got your dashboard, so you always have access to all of your apps. And they do have really good source files here. So as you saw, we copied and pasted a lot of the functionality that was already there inherent within adding the code to the client, to the server, how to install it on Node, and so on. And then all of our keys really nicely presented. And there's also some really amazing tutorials. So one of them is build live comments using JavaScript. So a lot of the functionality that we were looking at is also available within this tutorial. And this is a little bit more advanced. There's more information, styling, and how to set this up. So again, if you are looking for more extended and advanced functionality, you can look at some of the tutorials that are available on the site. They do have 109 different tutorials with all of the source code. And this particular one as well has a GitHub repository. So if you want to set this up really quickly, you can go over and download it, clone it from GitHub. And just going back into our application, the way that it's set up is that as soon as anybody posts any type of information, we're going to be retrieving it back here within our visual area of our web page. So it doesn't matter which browser we're opened up on, we can see that as soon as the message gets posted, it's actually going to get sent into both of them. And this would be the same thing. So it doesn't matter how many browsers are open. As long as they're open to the same page, they're going to be retrieving this pushed information. And that's the real beauty of this. And there's so many different directions you can go with this. So having this simple foundation to build upon, the sky is the limit as to what you can do. So do try it out for yourself and see what you can make happen. And the source code to the earlier lessons is also included, so you can open that up and jump right in as well and get started and building, extending what we've learned in the earlier lessons.